is Trent Carlson. I'm a local director, producer, and we have some esteemed guests here that I'm going to introduce right away. I was very excited when they asked me to participate in this because, you know, I think that we are at a very unique time in, if you look at the history of cinema, never before have we had the tools being accessible by so many people, and there's this, you know, technology is increasing the quality of the cameras and the post finishing tools, and what's happening is everybody's getting access to that stuff, and this is something that's continuing to I think that we're going to feel the effects of for a long time. Along with that is obviously a lot more content. So those are we're going to talk a little bit about the amount of films that are getting made at this level, as well as we're going to talk about the explosion that's happened with internet screening, streaming, and being able to show stuff online and get it out there in a different format other than just theatrical. So I will start to introduce these guys to you. We've got 3 filmmakers. First of all is Sean Baker. Sean is a New York native who went to NYU. He has done a couple of feature films called Takeout and Prince of Broadway, both of which received Spirit Award nominated. They were both nominated for the Spirit Award. Prince of Broadway was mentioned as a Best Mention in 2010 by the LA Times, as well as received a special jury prize at the Locarno Film Festival. His film Starlet is playing here at the festival. It's actually screening at 6:15 tonight down at the Empire on Granville. So if you are leaving here and you get the urge to go run out and see a movie, that's the movie you should go see. And it is being distributed right away, I believe, the start of November by Music Box Films. And Sean also has a career in comedy, TV comedy. He's the creator of Greg the Bunny and Warren the Ape, which, if you've seen these, they're very funny, astute, and executed with such a unique charm and tone. So try to check those out. Beside Sean is Jay Von Hoy. Jay has a production company called Parts and Labor that he formed in 2004 with Lars Knudsen. I knew I'd get it wrong. And they have completed 20 films to date, I believe, or more than 20? Almost. Yeah, we got 20 films in the can. None of them are completed. No, they are completed. Jay actually worked under Scott Rubin originally as an intern and then as assistant. And if anybody knows Scott Rubin, he is one of the most prolific producers. Most recently, he did The Social Network, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, thank you, and also True Grit. And I believe your producing partner, Lars, also worked for Scott. Jay has been on numerous Producers to Watch lists, including TIFF, Filmmaker Magazine, New York Observer, and recently, I believe, the Huffington Post. Jay is also an advisor on the Sundance, advisor to the Sundance Institute's Creative Producers Initiative. Is that just for American producers?
It isn't, but it's a strong concentration of American producers. It's okay. A support system for American producers. But there have been Canadian producers that have partaken in it past couple of years. It's a fairly new program.
Okay. So we're having a little social after, and you can bend his arm and get him to get you in there.
You in there.
I know you can't, but you can talk to him about it and ask, some stuff about it. Jay has Keep the Lights On in the festival here, which is a Ira Sachs film. He has upcoming projects, one of which is Red Light Winter, starring Kirsten Dunst and Ben Foster, and he also has Greg Araki's film The Womb in the pipe, I think, or moving towards production. On the other side of Jay is Stephen Schardt. Stephen is based in New York and Seattle. Steve produced the indie hit called Hump Day, a great little movie that did way more than maybe expected. Very funny. It was released by Magnolia Films. It got a special jury prize at Sundance, and it also participated in the Director's Fortnight at Cannes, I believe. Stephen has also produced The Oregonian, which is a horror film, and also Your Sister's Sister, which is not a horror film. It's a drama. So, yeah. Upcoming projects, Stephen has Lynn Shelton's Touchy Feely. So Stephen is a producer, filmmaker. So this is our panel, and I guess before we get started, it would be nice to know that we can direct these questions to what you guys are interested in. So maybe we could just get a little show of hands. First of all, how many people here consider themselves filmmakers? That being a writer, director, producer. Maybe just lift up. Okay, so the room is full of them. And as far as producing or what type of stuff you've made, how many people have done shorts, just shorts? How many people have finished a feature? How many people have worked on a feature over $100,000? Over 500,000? Million? 100 million. Okay, one guy here. You're in the wrong room. It's down the hall. Neil Blomkamp's putting it on. There's just one seat, him and you. Anyways, so let's get started. I can stop talking. I really wanted to keep it short, and I realize I haven't. And I also forgot to mention that City TV is the sponsor for our session here today, so I've got that out of the way too. So maybe we could just start, you guys, by if you could just tell us how you got into where you started at, what level you started at, and where you think that has budgets, or would you start at the same place you did in your initial place? So just give us an
Sure. I started out writing and doing short films and working in a small film community in Seattle, and just everyone kind of knew each other, and we started working on each other's projects. And Hump Day, for example, we had a crew between 6 and 8 people, depending on the day, and we shot that movie for $18,000 over a period of 10 days. So we're talking about really doable features, and I see that a lot of you here are probably aspiring to do a feature after doing a lot of short film. It seems like almost everyone has made a short film in this audience. But you can actually do a feature in 10 days or 12 days if you can constrain it in certain ways. I would not change a thing. I actually really prefer doing small, low-budget movies to larger budget movies, and we've done a couple of larger budget movies, and there's something really special about spending 2 to 3 weeks on an island with 12 of your best buddies making a movie and shooting 50 yards from where you're living. Like, that's actually a really fun project. And the key to this, and I'm sorry, I'll just go on because I'm just going to go on. But the key to doing this is, like, obviously you're, as a producer, you look at that and you say, well, okay, $18,000, no one is getting paid. But the equity model associated with these films, in the legacy from the mid-90s is just, 50% of the money goes to the investors and 50% of the money goes to the production company. But we've built in a model where for Hump Day, it was grants and loans, so 0% of the equity went to investors, and 100% of the equity goes to cast and crew. Likewise, for Your Sister's Sister, we were able to raise the money giving up only 3% of equity. So, and then 2% of it actually went to charity. So 95% of equity in the movie goes to the people that work on it. So if you can be fiscally responsible in that way, you're doing shorter shoots, you're paying people something, in our case, Vinny, our sound guy, we know what he needs to get through the month, and so we're being responsible in the sense of taking care of the people that we know, but also building in the financial structure of the film, a way for those people to make money if the film does well. And again, you're up against pretty big odds, but it's worked in our case, and really hope that a lot of people espouse this model where you are, doing the movies that you want to do, retaining control of them, doing it with people that you know and like or love, and making sure that people are taken care of in the end. So I wouldn't do anything differently, yeah, and I'd continue to do this.
I started as an intern. I'm originally from Texas. I moved to New York and started working there. I loved New York. I love the city, and I realized that I wanted to produce films, and so I worked for producers and tried to glean as much from them as I could. I met my partner Lars Knudsen, and we were both working for Schardt, and at some point, I guess I had this realization that I could spend the next. I was unemployed and I was looking for work, and I was up against somebody's cousin, like the producer's nephew, for a job as his assistant, and I got the job, but I was also like, well, shit, if this is what it's going to be like I might as well take 6 months and try to make a film, rather than do this, and rather than like take 6 months to then work for somebody. And that inspired us very much. We already knew we wanted to work together and try to produce by that point. This was probably like 2004 or so, and we set about trying to make a film. I don't have deep pockets. I didn't have any very close financial relationships. I didn't have any financial relationships at all. I mean, we were surviving off of unemployment and freelancing, and so we set about trying to raise money for a movie called Gretchen. That that was a $350,000 budgeted film that we made in Austin, Texas. From there, we worked on Old Joy and Wild Tigers I've Known. So that year, we had these 3 films that were all sort of like coming together at the same time and going into festivals. What we learned was that we wanted to work on multiple films at once, that's sort of how we could keep our brains active, and that's sort of what we enjoyed about producing, and which was part of the reason why we were choosing producing over directing, where you spend several years on a lot of times, you end up spending several years on one film. And would I do anything differently? I guess, I'm sure I would if I really thought hard about it. I mean, one of the things that I don't think in terms of dedicating myself and putting my shoulders into it and going full on into just basically jumping off the cliff and trying to produce, I don't think I would do that differently. But I think one of the major differences between now and when we were just initiating, there was a lot less information out there. The internet had not yet exploded with all of the sites and resources for filmmakers in 2004, 2005. It just wasn't there the same way it is today. So we were like looking at old books to try to figure out the industry and like talking to all of our friends, anybody that would tell us anything. But now that stuff's pretty available. And as we started to ascend, I think in terms of resources and quality of films that we were making, and the bottom dropped out of the economy in 2008, and so that was its own interesting experience as someone trying to do things independently and raising money from people that were, who do you raise money from when all the money goes away? And in terms of low budget filmmaking, it's something that, it's more of the process and the community and the way of and the hands-on nature of the production that I really enjoy. And in the bigger films that we've done, and I use bigger sort of comparatively because, I mean, the biggest films we're doing are $3-4 million at this point, but what we're able to do because we have such an ingrained understanding of making movies at low budgets, take a lot of those practices and bring them into these bigger, like these films that wouldn't ordinarily have them, or they might be managed a different way. And I think it makes for a more enjoyable production. I think hopefully it's unique. It's certainly something that where we're able to where we're able to keep the bottom line in mind, but we're able to understand how the relation between the creative choices and the bottom line in a real meaningful way. And I think in a way that we can be much more supportive rather than reductive. So that, and a lot of directors and a lot of filmmakers, I mean, a lot of directors that we're talking with, that's what they want out of the experience on production. And so keeping, intimacy on set, keeping the important collaborations to like just going and communication up and things like that. I think that's, I mean, I could go into a lot more detail about, production and what kind of equipment and what and like sort of where you're just allocating resources, I think is what I've taken away from it. It's something that I want to continue doing, but unfortunately, I think we'll probably get into this, like sustainability just prevents you to really continually make low budget movies. It's been our bread and butter for years. And I love doing it. But it's also I've burned through relationships. I've almost been kicked out of my apartment, like the whole gamut. So I think there's a lot to talk about there, and yeah.
Hello, everybody. So let's see. It's been a crazy 20 years since I graduated NYU. There's been a number of I made 4 micro-budget films up to this point, and hopefully the next one won't be micro-budget. I know that's different from what how Steven sees it, but no, I think I will be making another micro-budget in the future. But it does take its toll after a while, and the way I see micro-budget films is that they're stepping stones, and they will help you get if you want to get bigger. I think they will help you get to that point if they're successful. I've had several opportunities, or two major opportunities in the last, since I graduated NYU, that has allowed me to make these films, and I'm happy that has happened because I was able to make 4 films that I had complete creative control on, and I made the films I wanted to make. Those opportunities were right out of school. I landed a job at a publishing company, and I was like their AV guy. And I ended up making a commercial for them and used the resources from that television commercial to fund my first feature. I bought all of the raw remaining stock off of Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys. Sat in the refrigerator for 2 years until we raised $50,000 to shoot this film. It was a 35mm film, which I'm proud of. It got, it's out there. It's not, it's probably, I don't recommend searching it out, but it's out there. It's a young film. I made it at 24 years old, and it was very much like it was a look at the guys in suburbia USA. It was very much, you could say it's like a Kevin Smith sort of movie, but with a social realist take on it, very realist look at that world. And I didn't know anything about the film festivals at the time. I had to slowly learn about the process of getting a movie out there. It was finally, it actually premiered at South by Southwest, and after that, I didn't really know how to take it further, how to do the international premiere, and how to get it. It got a small distribution deal on DVD and VOD. But anyway, at the same time that was happening, I had another opportunity. My friends and I were sitting around one day, bored, in the late 90s, and I was in post-production on this movie, and we picked up an old VHS. This was really before the internet, or the internet was not, there wasn't YouTube yet, and our outlet for our creative, for our creativity was Manhattan Neighborhood Network, which was public access. And we made a public access show with a puppet. Just one night, 3 guys, kind of intoxicated, grabbing a puppet and riffing. And we put it on, and next thing you know, William Morris saw it. We ended up doing a program for the IFC. This eventually, over the years, led to Fox, back to IFC, to MTV. So it's been this great side job that I've had that has sort of supported me throughout the years and has allowed me to make these films that I love, because that I love to make, because basically my goal is a feature filmmaker. It's not comedy television. I love working in that world, and it pays the bills, but I'm a cinephile at heart, and that's what I want to do. So that has led. At that point, I made 3 movies. After that, I made 3 films: Takeout, Prince of Broadway, and now Starlet. But I guess, and I'll pass the mic over to you now. But I think the sustainability is so important when you're making these sort of films, and to find, if you're lucky enough to find that other thing that can pay the bills, that can get you through, and that you're still loving, that's ideal. And I've been very lucky to have those things to help me with these micro-budget films.
I mean, ideally, those things that you're working on, if you're working on something else and you're supplementing the bridge to your next movie, ideally that's something that's also factoring into your craft, and something that you're finding creativity and stimulation, and it's going to make, ideally it's going to make your next project better. That's the ideal situation. For everybody who's I mean, one of the questions I think we all ask ourselves is, what should I make my movie about, and who am I trying to make it for? Maybe you guys could just talk a little bit, and maybe over to Stephen and Jay as producers. Can you guys just express the type of thing that you're looking for in a project, if somebody's going to approach you, for yourself as a producer, but also what kind of a relationship you're looking at to try to take something on, and especially something, let's keep it small. If somebody approaches you with a micro budget project, what do you consider to be a good project?
That is highly. I mean, I've tried to figure this out. Like, if there's no pat answer I can give to that, but I'm just constantly surprised by material that's coming to me, or not surprised for a really long time, and then thankful that something comes along. I just read a script that I saw, and I didn't want to come on as a producer, but I wanted to edit the film, so I'm editing a feature now, and that was something that was just very personal. And then a friend of mine in Seattle had done his first feature called William Never Married, which is a wonderful sort of raw drama that he stars in, and he now has a werewolf movie that he wants to do, and it's a genre picture, and I can say, like, oh, this is going to be, not only can we do this for a little bit of money, but it's going to be a really fun project to work on, and it's a genre piece, and we could probably sell it for something really decent. So, there are financial considerations that go into all of these things, though. Really, when you're making movies at a level between like $14,000 and $25,000, that should be the least of your concerns. You should really want. I mean, obviously, everyone wants to sell their movie. Everyone wants the maximum number of people to see it. You want to be able to make a living off of these things, but most of us have like side gigs, or like the job component of our jobs, and then the real passion projects. So, I mean, if you're a first-time director, it's obviously that's your passion project, and I mean, my advice for anyone who's here is just try to make that project doable at a really low budget level, because I don't know, unless you have some context that I don't have, you know, to do your movie for $1 million or $2 million. Why don't you
Well, I know the secret formula. No, I don't. I have no idea. I think that the only way that I think I can try to summarize that is to say that if I feel an emotional connection or some connection to what I'm reading or watching or talking about with somebody, that's going somewhere, you know, and it's easier for me to imagine the possibilities of the finished film, and then that sort of turns into a loop that sort of, okay, I can imagine the finished film, and then I can imagine, okay, so now this is how it's feeding into itself, and I can see it's maybe recognizing something along those lines. Honestly, I mean, you connect to something, and what we try to do is stay as open as possible, you know, and I think it's a lot easier to criticize something than it is to consider what's possible when you're reading. It's really easy to dismiss. It doesn't take much energy to dismiss something. It takes a lot more energy to try to know how things could connect together or how the thing could be improved. And in some ways, I feel like I'm at, you know, my life is dedicated to story and to understanding it and developing a deeper, better understanding of what makes a good film and what makes a good story. And so I'm always, you know, I don't know. It's with that in mind that, because I mean, you take something like, I mean, okay. So the other side of that is the person who's the filmmaker or the person that you're planning to work with. And I think that is you know, I want to get out really quickly, or is pretty much up front, like what this relationship, what the expectations are going to be, and how we're going to be able to work together. And I feel a lot more confident in having that conversation now that I've made many films. Not confident in a way that I can bulldoze them, but confident in a way that I can actually feel comfortable engaging in that conversation with somebody, because I think it could be a little bit awkward trying to make explicit something that's often quite intuitive. But I think that by doing so, you actually sort of preserve the intuitive nature of the process, and you're able to, you know, recognize that there's a big part of this that's unspoken, and it's how we're going to be working together. You know, I think that like with one of the first films we were working on with Old Joy, you know, I knew that I'd read the script, I understood how it was going to work, I loved it. And then when you look at something like Beginners, I mean, they're two very different films. Beginners is so structurally complex. At first you read the script and you're like, wait, what is this? Like, how is this possible as a film? I don't understand. Like, I kind of see that it's super ambitious. Like, there's these weird long monologues with. It doesn't have the pictures of the. I don't know if anybody's seen the movie, but it doesn't have has a lot of like sequences in it where it's like found footage and photographs and things. And we didn't have those as reference when we were looking at them. We just had the monologues that Ewan, who wasn't cast yet, what his character was going to be saying, and how it's cross-cutting between these different time frames. But cumulatively, by the end of the read of the script, you really felt something hit you in the heart, and that to me was a sign. How is this piece of writing and that I'm imagining as a film doing that to me? And that intrigued me. And so, and we're working, you know. And then there's a horror movie. There's other ways, like they sort of grab me by my heart, grab me by my mind, and that's the only way that I can try to approach that question. You know, So hope that's helpful. I don't know. I mean, but I do think there's some real truth to it, because if you're connecting with what you're working on, it's an honest connection, and that connection is hopefully going to be felt by the person who's on the other side of that. I mean, that's what an audience is going to be doing. An audience is going to be connecting with the finished version of the film. They have to be for the film to be successful. If that's not going to work, if the audience isn't connecting with it, I mean, if I'm not connecting with it, how can I expect an audience to connect with it? If you're not connecting with it, how can you expect an audience to connect with it as a filmmaker? You know, and so to me, that's a really sort of valid criteria for assessing a film that we want to work on. But I also love good stories, and so I'm always trying to enhance that or make the story more. I like ambitious storytelling and content and form, and so we're all looking at that too.
I'm always really sad when I see a great movie, but I realize it's been sitting sleeping and it hasn't had the elements that maybe a distributor or a sales agent can use to actually reach out and grab that audience. Maybe you guys could talk a little bit about, or Sean, maybe you can, just a little bit about, I mean, you get that initial idea, you love the idea, you're inspired by the idea, and you want to make the movie. How far do you think forward? Because, we are in this age where the trailer has become an extremely important selling tool. It always was in the theaters, but now with handheld devices and everybody's looking at stuff or tasting stuff before they see it. Where does that fit into the process of trying to make a movie early on, given where we are kind of, with the internet and how we reach out and try to find good content?
I'm sorry, you're referring to what you put in order before?
Just sorry to clarify. If you're actually considering making a movie, how far do you think ahead to the process of when it's going to be handled by a distributor or getting out into the world? What is the link between, do you bring that into the choice of what you're going to make?
Well, first and foremost, I think that you always set out to just make the best film you can make. But then, of course, you do start thinking ahead. You're like, if I finish the film by this point, you'll have it done by the Sundance deadline. So sometimes that dictates when you shoot during the year, or who you're casting. And then when you're on the set, you have to be you have to have the best set photographer to get all of the right shots for your press kit and for all of the PR that will hopefully be necessary if you get distribution. So all of those little things are thought about, far in advance. With casting now, of course, it's like who will be most impactful. Who nowadays you really need, you do need bigger names. People are taking risks and still, I had all not non-professionals, but first-time actors in many of my films. My last film, Starlet, stars Dree Hemingway, Mariel Hemingway's daughter, Ernest's great-granddaughter. She has not acted before. This is her lead role debut, but that name is she's already a supermodel. She's known to a certain degree. Her name is at least known. So in a way, she's our star. She's our star without even having been a star yet, But to answer that question, it's just, I think that's, as a responsible filmmaker, and if you're producing as well, you have to think about that stuff in advance. But at the same time, I think ultimately you should be thinking about how to make the best film possible, because that's what's going to last.
I think at a formative stage, you're in the early stages, or when you have a screenplay. You probably don't want to be thinking about this too much when you're trying to put your film together, or not to trying to write your movie or trying to conceptualize it. I think that becomes the idea of an abstract. We always have an audience in our head, but if you're trying to make decisions according to that abstract audience, you're going to lose your compass is going to start spinning. You're not going to be able to get there. But at a certain point, you're going to have to explain your film to somebody who's going to have to explain it to somebody else. You're going to have to be able to say, this is what my film's about. And the only reason you're telling them, sure, but they're likely not the decision maker. They're the agent to the actor that you want to read it, or they're the executive at the company that may finance it, or they're the guy who's, the friend of the guy who has the money that might put it into the film. And so that in a way is a version of what the marketing is doing is for the distributor. They're telling the audience, well, this is the movie that you should go see in the trailer form. And for me, we've tried to come up with a trailer, looking at the script, like where's the trailer moments in the script? And you kind of say, okay, well, this is probably going to be like these scenes that you kind of see probably in trailers anyway, but ultimately I never really know until we're watching the movie. When I'm watching the film being made, I'm like, that could be it. That could be, that could be in the trailer, maybe. Yeah, okay. But it's not certainly not the primary determinant of what's a good scene or what's a good shot. It's just something you're sort of filing in the back of your head because it's important for, it's important for you as a filmmaker to have a clear understanding and of how your film can be marketed, so you can preserve the integrity of the message that is going out about it. And you might as well start that at a very early stage when it's a script. But thinking about it, but of course you're not having to create a trailer at that point. You're just having to tell somebody that's going to, hopefully get on board and support you and support your movie.
It's a few minutes after 10 after 4 already. We do want to get into a couple of questions. I did just want you guys to ask or to talk a little bit about digital distribution or what the end game is. Right now, everybody has the dream of making a movie and getting it into the theaters. What happens if we don't get it into the theater? What other viable kind of digital formats or ways in which your guys' movies are being seen that you can share?
Me
Back
too.
to Jay.
In terms of digital distribution, I mean, I think like it's really the distributor and the partner. I think there's so many ways for your films to get dumped. It could get dumped in theaters. It could get dumped on video. It could get dumped in VOD. It could just not be properly supported. And so, I think every a distribution medium is actually a very valid way for people to see your film. I personally love the theatrical experience. I think it's actually the pinnacle of the way films can be experienced, and I think it's a great thing. I want all the films that we're producing to be in theaters. There's no question about it. And I think it makes a tremendous difference for the films that we're producing, and it's in our creative, sort of in the core of what we're doing to try to, within the cinematic language of the film and the way that it's meant to be projected. But it's cut for, if you're going for a laugh on a television, you can actually cut a lot faster after that laugh. But in a theater, you have to give it a little bit more space. And I think that or else you won't hear the lines of what's happening next if it's a successful joke. So I think there's an aesthetic for cinema in theaters, and I'm all for it. And I love it. I don't think there's, I think that there's ways to actually have a big impact on all media. I think that VOD can be huge for your film if your distributor knows what they're doing, and if you feel like your film can fit that way. I think it's about understanding your goals professionally, financially, what you want out of distribution. In a more sort of nuanced way, which is to say, like, do I want people, do I want just 1 million people to passively see my film on their iPhones, or like to be on YouTube and try to get as many hits as possible, and maybe they're watching it, maybe they're not, or do I want there to be really good reviews, do I want the reviews to my film to help support me and so I can point at these when I'm going to make my next movie? I think that but at the end of the day, nobody wants their film to be lost, and if you're faced with, my film's going to never see the light of day, or nobody's ever going to see it, well then you accept the deal you kind of feel like might just be dumping it into VOD Neverland and hoping that it's going to cross over in there too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it could be really. I don't think there's any real clear. I think it's more the quality of and the care and attention that your distributor's paying to your film in any one of those outlets, more than just whether or not they're by themselves meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're gonna just shift over and let you guys ask these guys a few questions. The first person to ask a question actually gets a copy of Shotlister. Right over here, fantastic. This is it's a program that's was designed by Zach Lopivsky, I believe. Sorry, I think I'm getting Zach's last name wrong. Lipovsky, thank you. It's a great program. Anyways, you're now owner of that Shot List app. Go ahead with a question, please.
When you guys are producing these really low, ultra-budget movies, Stephen, you mentioned the 10-day, 18K shoot. I was wondering if you could reveal some of the less obvious tips and tricks that you do to keep the numbers down in your budgets.
So the stories are kind of the stories that I've been talking about. So, for example, Hump Day and Your Sister's Sister, I would call those chamber films. You have basically one or two primary locations. You have on Hump Day we had one light or something. You know, it was very ridiculous. We were running 2 cameras that were borrowed. You know, the biggest thing is keeping locations to a minimum and the number of days to a minimum. And for Your Sister's Sister, for example, we shot for 12 days. And so we were on an island. We were all living together. We were walking 50 yards to the picture house where we were shooting. And when you're doing that and you're pre-lighting, so you're basically like rigging everything so you can pop a couple lights on in the morning. In a traditional shoot day, you're doing a company move, you're doing load in and load out. You know, that's 2 hours in the front, hour in the back. If you're doing a company move, that's 2 hours, you know, like it depending on where you are. For Your Sister's Sister, you come in, you make 30 minutes of adjustments to the light, and you have 8 to 10 hours of shoot. You know, you have a lot more time to shoot. So keeping locations to a minimum is an option. Is a really good thing to keep your budget low. Working with friends who like want to support your project. I mean, at that point, we just sort of all knew each other, and we're just like, let's make this movie. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And you can't do that after a certain point or on particular kinds of movies. You know, if you know, for the next Lynn Shelton movie, you know, we had used a crew between 25 and 30, so we're not doing a story where you can just stay in one location with your buddies. I just was down on a set with this first time feature director, Josephine Decker, where we shot on a farm in Kentucky, and we all lived in the main house, but there's a lot of sort of varied kinds of landscape, a lot of locations, barns, streams, forests, you know, like, so that we're all centralized, and again, you have that kind of efficiency of not requiring a ton of movements or load in. Again, 3 or 4 lights, keeping lights to a minimum. We used a lot of natural light. The film looks gorgeous. Shooting on 5D, it looks great, and you just have to have a very skilled DP and a film whose aesthetic will benefit from having a low budget. What else can I say? Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah,
Let's do it
my
together.
second film, Takeout, which I co-directed with Shi Ching Zhou, we did everything ourselves, everything. So I think part of this, and I'm talking, this is like an extreme. The film was shot for was basically made for $3,000, and it's all about wearing as many hats as you can wear. But you have to have you keep your crews very small, but everybody has to be skilled in those departments that they're wearing many hats in. So you can't skimp on that. So, but for example, you know, Shi Ching and I co-directed Takeout together. But on the new film, Starlet, she was an executive producer / costume designer / continuity. You know, but she's amazing at those other jobs. So, you know, it works. You have to really find a great team of people to work with. But just some of the shortcuts that I've found quite useful, and I still do it even on Starlet, which was a $250,000 budget. For example, music. You know, music can get so expensive, and sometimes there are tracks that you just have to spend the money on because they're known tracks, and there's no way to work around that. But for the most part, you can find free music. You have MySpace, which is now completely music oriented, and you reach out to these bands that aren't signed yet, and you know, you offer, you basically offer credit, and these bands are looking for exposure. And you know, I did that on all 3 films. That's one little shortcut, but you find all these shortcuts and these ways of saving money, and it can be done. And also just being technically, as filmmakers working on this level, I think you really need to know your technical stuff. You really need to know, just so that you can sometimes jump in, and if you lose suddenly, your editor, who you're not paying that much, has to go off to a paying job or something like that, you can jump in and take over, and you know the machines, and you know how to that's very important. So I think if you're going to be working on that level of the budget, you have to be able to actually know the craft of the technical side of filmmaking, I think.
I'll just add to that real quick that the director needs to be out front of the film. You're basically, it is so reliant upon the director understanding what they're getting into, and oftentimes you're begging and borrowing from everyone. And if it's coming, you rely so much on your director to be the face of the film, to be making those asks, because people they know what it means to support a director. They don't really know what it means to support like somebody who's working for a director, for locations, for food, for the basics that you need to make the movie.
We have a question over here, sir. Oh, did you already hand it out? Okay. Thank you.
So I have a 2-part question. So when it comes to raising funds, how important would you say is getting an entertainment lawyer on board? And what would you say, how important would you say a business plan is also when it comes to raising the funds?
I think getting an entertainment lawyer involved is extremely important. You need to have an entertainment lawyer that you can at least ask questions of, and a lot of what they provide anyway is templated at first, but having a familiarity with the corporate structure and the finance structure of your film is key. It's ultimately not that complicated. It's basically something that you want to be able to communicate accurately to the financiers, and as soon as money starts to touch the film, you need to have a lawyer involved at that point, definitely. Or as soon as you start to go into any kind of legal negotiations, absolutely. And the second question was about a business plan. I've spent so many hours making business plans. I have made so many business plans. And I have never raised money off of a business plan. I think you need to know what your business plan is. You need to know you need to have a good understanding of it. I think if you're presenting somebody if you're going out cold and you're saying, here's a 120-page script, here's a 30-page budget, here's a 15-page business plan, here's my lookbook, people are just going to say, I don't know what to do with this, and they're never going to say yes to your film because they don't know how to read your script, they don't know how to read your budget, your business plan has to be so educational at that point that the big problem with any business plan in film, is that you don't have distribution. So what is that business plan ultimately achieving for you? But to say, I'm going to get the film to a certain point where we're going to bet on, the lottery at this film festival, and ultimately that's not a business plan that's going to compel anybody to put money into it. If any financier sees that or is considering it and needs a business plan to be able to make a decision, they're going to hand that to their financial advisor, and their financial advisor is going to say, hell no, do not invest in this. It's terrible. It's not a good idea, which is exactly what they should say. They're doing their job. The reason why people get involved with a film is because of the excitement of the people that they're talking to, the excitement that they feel talking with the filmmaker and with the producer, and the excitement about the project, and that is represented as much better, I think, in story terms that engage people, whether that's video or pictures or the work that you're doing, or just like what your narrative is that you're using to sell the film itself and talk about the film. I think is going to get people. The secondary part is, yeah, and here's the investment. 120%, 50-50 split, or if you're doing something like Steven's doing, it's like, this is a loan structure or however. So And I think more important, and the most important thing is to know who you're talking with and to know what they're interested in. And so it's hard to personalize a business plan in that way. I don't know how important they are. I don't know.
I think what Jay is saying is incredibly important. It's the narrative of the story, like the excitement that you get from the script and the director and the artistic vision. And if you can communicate that really directly in person with someone who wants to invest in the film, that's the most important. And business plans, I hate business. I don't think I've ever used one, but what is important, I think, is a spreadsheet. How does the money work? Like what people, the thing that's always missing from the business plan is like, oh, Little Miss Sunshine made this the box office. Little Miss Sunshine has nothing to do with your movie, and nor do any other of your like comp films that you can sort of put down. But what does work is saying, when this money comes in here, this is exactly what happens with it. And if your model is fair and your model is good, then people understand it. I mean, for Your Sister, I approached this family that had no desire to give us their property, their 65 acres of land to shoot on for 3 weeks. And walking through exactly what happens on a film, I've never gone through it in such detail. Like, how does production work? How does this happen? And they got equity in the movie, so I had to describe all, like, how cash flow works. It's not here's what we expect to make, or here's what other films make. It's this is what happens when a dollar comes in, you know.
Yeah, that is called either the cash flow schedule for how film money is going to be spent, or when money starts to come in, it's called a waterfall. And your entertainment attorney can help you with that. That is actually an exhibit. It should be an exhibit in the investor agreement, or it's best if you have a waterfall exhibit in your investor agreement, because it says, first position is any kind of union guild payments. Second position is, the equity is going to recoup. Then there's a premium on top of that. Then it's going to be split, or depending on how complex your. I'm assuming if you're making a micro budget film, there aren't going to be any loans or anything like that. But then that is illuminating for somebody. They feel like you know what you're talking about. That you've got it. That it is a sound business, and you're not overstating what's possible. You can say, well, look, I mean, everybody's aware that independent films can sell for a lot of money at a film festival, but what we're trying to do is, we have a better sense of the lay of the land, and that's much better as a discussion than a presentation, I think.
Question at the back here. Somebody has a microphone.
I was just wondering, since you guys are producers more, I guess, in the American system, how did you guys go about establishing yourself as independent production type companies as yourselves through that system?
The way that we did it was we just kept working. And just went to every film festival. I think there's a community, actually a thriving community that is the international independent film community. And the people intersect at film festivals, and they get to know each other, and so you sort of accumulate relationships and just being yourself, I suppose.
You just say, I am an independent producer. There you go. But yeah, that's exactly it. Just you have to make your first short or feature, and then once you start going to festivals, then you meet other people who are involved in that, and just keep going. Persistence.
Yeah, I basically had to use my own money, spend my own money for the first 3 films. And then after the third film, Prince of Broadway, got the attention of Ted Hope, who you may know. He's independent film guru. He's produced many films. Martha Marcy May and In the Bedroom, classics. And he really liked my film, and he helped us find financiers. So thank God this is the first one I didn't have to pay for myself. But it took those micro budgets to get to that point.
Question here. Oh,
Hi.
sorry. Go. Okay.
Thanks, guys, for coming here today. Just a quick question, two-parter kind of thing. How many projects do you end up juggling at one point is kind of a good question. You seem to be all multitaskers and jugglers, as most of us are. The other one is do you have any kind of what kind of software apps or what do you use to control the cash flow schedule, and is there a magic bullet out there? Is it something custom, or do you just write it down in a notebook, or how do you control that?
Currently, I'm finishing producing Touchy Feely, the next Lynn Shelton movie. I'm writing something and developing something. I'm working with another director who's writing a horror script that I'm going to have some involvement with. I'm developing Lynn's next movie. I'm editing a film. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on simultaneously, and like there's a slate of 3 other ideas that are like being developed by me or someone else. So I think it's just, you just keep working on as a producer, as Jay said earlier, like you're working on a ton of different things at once. You're working, and as a director, you're kind of trying to get your one project through. And then as far as like software, I use Excel. I use Excel, Word, and email. So that's basically it.
I have 3 films that are editing right now that I'm producer on, that I'm directly involved with. They are 2 fiction narrative films, 1 documentary. They're all hopefully finishing this fall. A film that I hope will go into production over the next month, and then a film that will go into production in 2 months. Several projects that we're developing that are sort of in the script stage, and a handful of other films that we're targeting to try to get made for next year. So it's quite a lot. In terms of software, I'm an Excel freak. I do all of, yeah. To me, it's like knitting. It's meditation. It's the one thing that I can control. It's a foundation. It's like, where's the earth? It's my cash flow schedule. It's all manual. I take the budget, I enter it in, and I go through and I actually think about each week and how much we're going to put in each. Obviously, like it can be pretty routine, but I like to juggle around and shuffle around with it. I loved what you were saying about the spreadsheets and the waterfall and tweaking it and trying to understand it. Like that also helps inform how I'm thinking through not only investor deals but also distribution deals. I'm always just running the math on it. I'm doing my own projections. And that is a self-learned experience. I didn't have anybody explain Excel to me. In terms of, but of other software, of course, is the EP budgeting and scheduling and basic, production software, standard stuff. Also, I find those to be very manual programs. I don't think there's anything automatic about the scheduling at all, or the budgeting. And I think that process of dumping it out of your brain and taking it out of the script is actually quite helpful. And in terms of managing the workload, I work off of Word, and I love the notebook layout in Word. I find that to be really helpful. I go between spreadsheets and Word and email, and that's I try to branch out into new software. Like I was working on things, and I liked things, but then I lost track of things. So I don't use it as much as I use these other. It's just sort of how you manage your own to-do list. I don't know. We have slate meetings a couple times a week, and we go through our slate, and we think, we talk about that's within our company. But
as a writer-director, this is the first time that I'm actually consciously juggling a lot, and it's because of these smaller films in which you're taking care of everything. Well, there are very few people taking care of everything. We could only handle one project at a time, but I'm trying. I'm getting older, so I'm trying to be more prolific. So it's like I have 4 things that I'm trying to develop right now: 3 films and a television series. But we used Movie Magic, I believe. Yes.
Let's one here and then one over there as well, please.
Hi. Just at this budget level, I just wondered if you could briefly comment on camera and post considerations. You said you shot 35. That's kind of rare these days. There's not even a film lab in Vancouver anymore. You said 5D, which seems to be the go-to camera. post considerations and working like with a 5D, which is a very compressed signal, and what goes out to film festivals these days? Can you get away with a DCP or Blu-ray, or do you have to have a film print still, that sort of thing?
I haven't. Well, I guess our documentary is the 5D or the 7D. It seems to be going fine. I don't. You know, QuickTime ProRes seems to be the basic editorial media for any. It's sort of is the equalizer of all media. I think, like whether you're, because we're doing a 35 project, a Red project, and a 5D project now that are editing. They're all editing in ProRes. In terms of festival exhibition, everything's moving to DCP, and I guess Sundance hasn't. I mean, I think they're at they still do HD cam. They're not SR, but just HD cam. In terms of post workflow, it's pretty straightforward. It's really like where you're going to spend them. I try to put all my resources to the color correct and the mix and our sound. And I think working with people that are really talented that are coming up when you're on a low budget film, you can probably get a pretty decent price on your mix. And that, I think, if anything, the digital aspects of everything make post-production more scalable. A lot of sound, Sound One I heard just shut down in New York, which is like a big sound house in New York. And I think part of the reason is because what's been happening over the past 5 to 10 years is that sound editors are moving into their homes, and so they're working out of their homes, which is sort of normal. Because the software has gotten so good. So so I don't know. I hope that answers your question in terms of workflow. And it's really just we were just talking about it up front too. It's like different ways to get film costs down in post.
So I think we'll have one last question here. It's 4:30, so we'll take this and then we can all move over. Okay. Okay. Keep asking.
I guess this is more a question for Jay, perhaps. When you're working in the micro-budget world, I would assume that you're working in a non-union environment primarily. And when you move to 1 to 5 mil, you're going to be working primarily in a unionized labor environment. And I'm wondering if there are big differences for you as a producer, and if you have any preferences as to, working in union, non-union, or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that the budget levels in the U.S. I haven't done any work in Canada, so I'm not so sure how this translates. But rule of thumb, U.S., you're over $1 million, and unions are going to start paying attention. The way that works out is that it's hard to get up to $1 million because of unless you're making use of the SAG diversity incentive, which means that you have a fairly diverse cast. And that way you can get to 936,000, and that's in and around $1 million. At least I think that's the number. But otherwise, you're sort of in a 600 to 750 level as sort of capping out, because also the unions have created a tier 0, and this probably of no use to you guys, but it at 1.5 million. I guess that's just a long way of saying yes. The union regulations have an incredible impact on us because it inflates the costs within our budget, and so constantly when we're trying to assess whether or not a film can be made at what level, there's this there's a big divide between, okay, well, it's either we're going to basically make it the same movie at $1 million as we are at $3 million. The only difference is that we have a union. We have more departmental resources, but we have a union crew, and we're in the what we call the tier 1 range. And in terms of my personal preference, there are things that I really appreciate about working with a union and in scale film when I have the resources that I need to make it. And that is that everything is regulated. There's so much abuse that happens at the low micro budget level with crews. Not to say that it doesn't happen at the bigger budget level either, because it definitely does. But crews just get whooped, and they're like disrespected and overworked and killed. And they kind of come into the experience like there's always a couple people that are going to come in swinging a little bit. And at least that's when you get into this, like when it's not just like 12 people. When it goes into the $750,000 range, it's brutal. And there isn't that foundation of, okay, well, at least we know what our minimum basic treatment is going to be on this movie. We're going to go into overtime after 10 hours or whatever. And so in some ways, I like that lower budget level because it forces people to talk to each other. And I like to communicate with the crew and make sure that they're aware of what's happening. But I also like the order that a union crew the union situation brings to the film. And I know, like, okay, it's just a formula. Like, I'm not having to do any kind of special calculation or worry about negotiating with the crew to go to, 14 hours tonight. I know that if I go into their turnaround, I'm going to pay them time and a half in the morning, and they're probably going to like getting that time and a half. And, we're going to be double time on the Teamsters. Like, the formulas, you're just working out the formulas. In terms of environments, I think it's two different challenges. And for creative environments, I think a low budget film has its own challenge. I think I love like shacking up, all like living in the same house, everybody working together and getting having that intimate, great feeling. I don't think that it's really sustainable at that low budget past 18 days. I think that's your maximum schedule if you're paying people like around $100 a day. But with a bigger budget film, the challenge is to try to create that and try to have that feeling of community with each other and with the crew. And sometimes, that means firing the jerks, but that's not, I don't know, that's maybe a different topic. But it's definitely part of it. I mean, it's part of managing the crew.
Over here.
Hey there, you guys. I am curious, actually. You mentioned earlier, Jay, about information sources being prevalent now. Do you have any sources that you kind of go to figure out these things, like the $1 to $3 million? You make the same movie and you pay more for certain things. Like, is that from experience or from mentors or from like a source that you go to?
Yeah, it's from experience. In terms of, you can download the union, the agreements. So they're available online, and you can look them up, and you can look at. Outside of that, I mean, I think it's like, I don't know what online resources exist right now. I mean, you got like Filmmaker, you got IndieWire, and these websites, and I'm sort of drawing a blank on the specific. What I'm also working on creating an online resource that I hope will be available in like a year. And that would be more of a wiki that's designed for producers to access for production. And that hopefully would have a lot of, like, just be this sort of central place where a lot of stuff can be shared that's helpful like that. But it's sort of all over the place, I think. It's in different places.
I found it to be both experience, but also community. And the more you work yourself into the film community, I pick everybody's brain all the time. I just picked his outside. So it's really just about, there's that wealth of information that's out there amongst your peers. And if you're not, if you reach out, you can get that.
I just Google the shit out of everything. I mean, if I didn't know, like when I was first confronting like equipment and I had no idea what anything was, I got the grip electric list and I just went in and I took, grabbed an image and I put it into the Excel and I put it next to what they were asking for, and I was like, okay, so that's a Kino flow. That's the difference between a 4-bank Kino flow and a 4-foot Kino flow and an 8-foot. Oh, okay, that's what they're asking for with this, like, whatever. I don't know. I couldn't even tell you right now, but I did go through the entire equipment list and was able to pull the images and understand exactly what they were requesting so that when I saw it on set, I understood what it would be. There's, it's Google maybe. But there's like the Wikipedia, like if I have questions, I'm always like confused about aspect ratio. I don't try to keep all that stuff straight in my head. I just go to Wikipedia and they have this great, Wikipedia has like the best summary of all aspect ratio that I've ever seen. And it also has this great illustration. I've actually like put that on my computer, so next time I'm like having to figure out the difference between 16:9 and 185 and 177 and which one's HD and which one is Super 16 and how they are going to work and what's going to cut off what. And anyway, so
It would make a lovely poster.
it would. I'm hanging up in my office. It actually does. It's a beautiful. I can imagine. I picture it in my head right now. In fact, so yeah.
All right, one more question, and this person gets a shot lister app. Who's got it in them?
I get a shot, Lister?
Oh, somebody already has the microphone.
Sorry. Just in regards to like where you allocate a lot of your funds, do you find it works better for a film if you put it like pre-production, or do you focus more on post, like sound, and you mentioned color edits and things like that, or is that just personal preference as to what type of film you're making?
In terms of allocating resources, I think there are patterns within the films, but no one is the same. I think it comes down to the demands of the project. I think you just want to be able to, you want to make sure that you don't want to cannibalize your post-production as a result of choices you're making in production. You want to have a good, like the worst thing that can happen is, I mean, it's not the worst thing, but it's like a terrible thing that can happen to you is that you get to post-production and you don't have enough money to actually have post-production. And then you're raising money again in post. And at that point, you've locked yourself into a situation where, and this happens a lot on micro budgets because it's easy to justify spending that money during production. And now you're not going to be able to raise any money for your film until you have an edit. And so now you're screening your edit because everyone you're talking with, they say, oh yeah, your film's in post. Okay, show me a cut. When can I see a cut? That's going to be the first question they're going to ask. And then the type of investment that you're going to be raising, by and large, is going to be last in, first out type investment, which means that you're going to have to put that money in front of your equity, the people that have actually taken a bigger risk on investing in your movie. It puts yourself in a complicated position. It's better. It really behooves you to try to avoid. I think it's those things to consider when you're considering, like, well, we need that extra day of production, and you need it, and how are you going to do it? You have to address how you're going to take that money out of post. Like, can you rely on your friend to give you a free something, or can you do the color correct yourself, or how are you going to make that resource change?
It's very, very important. I mean, Starlet, that's what happened on Starlet. We did not, there were those things, those extra costs that were just not considered. And we ended up having to, I know you wanted to cover this topic, but I know it's late, but it's the whole funding thing. We actually had to go to Kickstarter to try to get our final finishing costs after we already got distribution, which doesn't work because you're there going, can you give us money for a film that has distribution and it's going to be out there and we consider a success already? No, so it's very important. We're right now still, we're still we're taking loans. We're in that exact situation, the last in, first out thing, and it's a pain. You really have to make sure you're covered across the board. It's not just putting it in heavier in one area or the other. It's really making sure that taking into consideration all those extra things. The HD cam tape alone costs $500 a dupe. I don't think you know how many you need as archival backups. So it's all of those things. Yeah.
All right. Well, just want to say thank you to all you guys for entertaining here and giving away the information, and thank you all for taking the time to come out to New Filmmakers Day. We are going to do a social outside where there's going to be drinks and stuff. So please join if you have any further questions.